Hey, Surly here today with a real gem and an American classic, the 45 caliber Ruger Old Army. Let's check it out. Let's open her up. Alright, so in our box, underneath this insert, we've got the kind of the owner's manual, got a few cleaning patches, we've got the proprietary Ruger nipple wrench, and of course, we've got the gun itself. We'll set the wrench there. So it's pretty large. It's quite long, like a lot of these cap and ball revolvers. And as you can see, just from an outside overview, we've got essentially a Blackhawk 3-screw Blackhawk frame with that big, thick top strap. And then we've got adjustable sights. I'll move this box out of the way. We've got the fully adjustable sights with a nice tall front blade, which makes for a very nice modern style of sight picture. Unlike a lot of the 19th century revolvers, where it's just a very simple notch and a very thin front blade, this is a nice, thick blade. It's about a little over 2 pounds, which I suppose is kind of typical, but a lot of the weight is here in the frame, and it's quite bulky. Ruger designed this thing like a tank, because again, it's effectively just a black powder Blackhawk. When Ruger set out to design this gun, they decided on essentially taking a Blackhawk frame and applying some kind of 19th century technologies to it. So, for one thing, this ramrod assembly and the method for securing it and the base pin to the gun is reminiscent of what you might find on a Whitney revolver, or a Rogers and Spencer, or a Spiller and Burr, or one of those other derivatives of Whitney, where you have kind of the screw that you can rotate a half turn, and when you do that, this entire assembly pulls out. So you would drop the ramrod and just pull the assembly forward, and that pulls out your base pin. However, all this is in one kind of puzzled together assembly. You can see there's not a single screw in the entire ramrod assembly. That, I guess, was done intentionally, as the 19th century ones would have been held together with screws. Ruger chose not to do that for whatever reason. But they kind of puzzle together as a result, so it's just kind of pegs and slots. So every time you take this apart, it wants to just come apart into 3 different pieces, right? The rammer, the rod, and the base pin. It doesn't make it very convenient, in my opinion, for cleaning. I personally would much rather have that entire assembly stay together when I take it apart. But in this case, it doesn't. So if you ever plan to run a conversion cylinder in one of these, reloading it can be kind of a chore for that reason, right? You'll have to take the ramrod assembly completely out of the gun to then reload your cylinder if you're doing that. And if it falls apart on you every time you take it out, it's not very convenient. So that's maybe one big downside of this, in my opinion. However, outside of that kind of design decision, the only other thing that Ruger took from the kind of 19th century designs were the safety notches, which are cut in between each chamber. Maybe I'll pick that up and show that to you a little bit better. You can see this notch right here, and you can rest your hammer in between 2 nipples right inside one of those notches, and it absolutely will not move. And I believe that design's taken from the kind of Remington 1858s, because they also had a notch. And Ruger also had an 1858 in their collection. So between that and the Rogers and Spencer, which were kind of the 2 revolvers they had, those were kind of the design decisions that were made based on those. So essentially, just to, again, it's a Blackhawk with design features from kind of those 2 revolvers, right? Okay, now let me show you this takedown process. So first we'll take a screwdriver, we'll just turn that screw. It's really just about a quarter of a turn. Drop our ramrod, and then we'll just grab the whole assembly, pull it straight out. From here you can place the revolver on half-cocked, and the cylinder just wants to roll right out. So very easy to take apart, actually. You can see that the rear end where the hand engages on the slots is quite different from any of the 19th century revolvers. On the front, we've got this little extension sticking out of the front of the cylinder. So it's a little bit of a different design. It's also quite bulky. On the back, you can see the nipples here. I'll take one out using our nipple wrench. Nice positive engagement. Okay. And if you can see this, these actually have a little hex head on the nipple there. And you can see pretty clearly that. And that's quite different from, again, 19th century guns, which have just a couple of flats that you would engage with a nipple wrench. So Ruger decided to implement a hex head here. You can use a kind of a socket wrench for this too, but the proprietary wrench is nice enough. And I suppose it comes with a screwdriver tip, so you could use that to undo your base pin retention screw. So let's take a look at the ramrod assembly. You can see there's a notch cut in here where that screw will engage. And as you can see, it just kind of links together, and we've already got our rammer kind of detached. And then our ramrod also detaches very easily, or rather that's our base pin. So our base pin comes off very easily, and our rammer comes off very easily. So you can see once you take it out of the gun, it kind of just wants to come apart, and I'm holding it together here kind of carefully. So we'll set this down. So let's go ahead and put it back together. Okay, and just a couple final things that I want to point out for this gun. This is a two-piece grip assembly, just like an 1858 Remington. When Ruger designed this frame, it took some cues from Colt, and so it's held on by 3 screws on the bottom, 2 screws on the back, just like a Colt. However, this grip frame is really just one piece, so that's kind of nice. It's not 2 pieces like a Colt. 3 screws are reminiscent of a Colt as well, with a hammer spring, and then a separate trigger and bolt spring, or rather trigger and bolt pin. All the springs in this gun, I keep saying spring because I'm kind of thinking about that as kind of a major design difference. Every spring in this gun is a coil spring. Every single one of them. There's a trigger return spring here with a detent that's a coil. The hand spring is a coil spring that's behind the grip here. And the internal spring for the bolt, I think, is also a coil spring. So everything in here is a coil spring. There are no leaf springs like you would find on a 19th century revolver. So that's quite a nice feature. We're adding a lot of reliability and a lot of longevity to those springs by using that kind of modern design feature. So again, that speaks to kind of Ruger's insistence and commitment to using modern design features when making this Captain Ball. They wanted to make the absolutely best and the strongest percussion revolver they could possibly make, and they certainly accomplished that. Let's get it put back together, and then we'll get to the range sessions. The Ruger Old Army loads like any other Captain Ball. Here I'm loading it with just a usual powder flask, putting a wad between the powder and the ball here, just a lubed felt wad. And then here I'm using Hornady 457 diameter round balls, and then we'll just ram it down, and we'll rinse and repeat for all 6 chambers. And now I'll cap it with 6-shot star cappers. And now we're ready to fire. Let's take a look at our targets. This one was kind of a sight-in. At first I was going a little bit high. This is a 15-yard target, so that's okay for what I was going for, which eventually was going to shoot for 25 yards, so a little bit farther out. This is 30 grains of 3F with a felt wad under a ball, just as you saw us load there. I think we started off to the left a bit, and then as I adjusted the sights to the center and down a little, we started getting a group over here and a little bit closer to center. But it's scattered a little bit because we're talking about 2 or 3 groups here that, again, shooting for alignment or sight adjustment rather. But still, in my book, not too bad for, kind of offhand shooting, even knowing that the sights were off. This is a 25-yard target with the same load. And this time I was using a kind of a paper cartridge here. Same load though, 30 grains of powder under a round ball. And we're a little bit more of a, like a shotgun pattern here, but again, this is a farther distance. That's a 25-yard string there. So again, from kind of a standing position with a pretty heavy 30 grain load, this thing can take about a max of 40 grains, but they tend to be more accurate the less powder you give them. You know, if you give it a 20 grain charge or something like that, and maybe not using paper cartridges, but using just loose loaded powder and ball, you might get better results. So we'll keep shooting this gun. We'll take it out a couple more times and see what kind of accuracy you can really squeeze out of the old Army, because they're kind of known for being quite accurate guns, just like a lot of these percussion revolvers. And if you'd like to get any of the gear that you saw in this video, in particular my loading stand here, the capper kits that I have available, or just some paper cartridge boxes, which I've got now in the kind of Colt style as well as my original stamped style. These are a flip-top design. They hold 6 rounds and a space for caps. So pretty slick and easy way to carry your paper cartridges and percussion caps. If you'd like to check any of that out, I have them available on my Etsy store, which is linked in the description. Other than that, if you like this kind of content and you'd like to see more of this kind of thing, cap and ball revolvers, kind of just old guns in general and talking about them and shooting them and that sort of thing, hit that subscribe button and maybe give the video a like, because there'll be more of that sort of content coming. Alright, thanks for watching.